Well, the first event we attended was the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair in Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia, and there were about 800 people there uh, in very hot weather. They were mainly from the Balkans, so that includes Greece, Slovenia, Croatia, Kosovo, etc. Serbia, let's not forget Serbia, but also people from the surrounding countries, Italy, Austria, Germany, Czech Republic, plus some from further afield like Switzerland, France, Spain, the Netherlands, and ourselves from Britain. And so there was a combination of organised anarchist groups from established organisations, as well as publishers, libraries like the Sierra Library in Switzerland, and smaller collectives as well as individuals. It started in the first Balkan book fair started in Ljubljana in 2003, and there's been one every year in one of the ex-Yugoslavian cities, so they move around. But actually this year there's going to be another book fair in Zagreb, the capital of Croatia as well. Has that happened already?
No, end of September. Yeah.
End of September, yeah. So it's all go there.
So the other one we attended was a much bigger event in St-Imier, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And it's hard to say how many people were there, but people are saying 5,000 to 6,000 over the course of 5 days. This was actually a 5-day event. And part of it was a book fair, which had quite a few stalls. I think, what are they thinking, about 100 exhibitors, they estimated. And then there was a whole series of meetings as well. So it was a very, very big event. And but it has historical precedence, because the reason it's in St-Imier and is because that's where in 1872, that all that time, 1872 was where the people think is the birth of the organized anarchist movement.
Well, the Anti-Authoritarian.
The Anti-Authoritarian
International.
So what they did is they met there at that Congress held in, so it had to do with like Karl Marx and the debate with, the difference with Karl Marx. And so it was the Congress of St-Imier was the consequence of this fracture. So St-Imier is considered a very important place. And when you walk around St-Imier, you can still see evidence sort of that, they actually have plaques up about this, about the anarchist movement and the different events that took place. So it's quite exciting to be in such a place.
There's for example, there's the house where Bakunin stayed when he was in St-Imier, and there's big plaques, big pictures of them as well, of Kropotkin, Elisée Reclus, James Guillaume, all leading members of the anarchist faction inside the First International.
So there was the whole town. And I'm trying to think about how big it is. What, 10,000 people?
Yeah, it's quite small. But
it's not a big place. But so really, when all these, and it wasn't called an anarchist event. It was actually called Anti-Authoritarian. And so we'll explain a bit later why there's a bit of a distinction. So if you think all these anti-authoritarian and anarchists appear in what is quite a small town, really, it was had a big impact. Not always positive, it has to be said.
Yeah.
And so there was events everywhere. So they had various venues, and the town had actually given over the council headquarters, where the council met, was actually where some of these meetings were held. You just can't imagine it in this country, really, that you had so much of the admin buildings were actually given over to some of the meetings. So there was loads of people who came. Again, there was some overlap. The Slovenian and Croat Anarchist Federation, despite having spent all that time organizing the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair, came at about 30 strong to St-Imier, which I thought was quite dedicated after having organised just about 10 days before. But it was a little bit more biased towards the French, the closer countries. So you had a lot more people from France, Germany, and were a bit more prevalent. The Germans had quite a strong presence, I would say, in the French.
Yeah, I'm for example, one of the groups there who weren't present at Ljubljana were the German group, Die Plattform.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other Germans there as well.
But also there was a Greek group that we know that came to St-Imier that hadn't been in a group that we're quite close to, called the APO. So, again, a range of people, but it was different in that it was, I suppose, a little bit more like a festival.
Rock festival.
So there was elements of that. And it was quite different from the Balkans Anarchist Bookfair in that sense. But some statistics, for example, that they had these kitchens that they set up. They figured, it was estimated that they distributed 5,000 meals on Saturday evening alone. So it really was quite an impressive effort logistically.
Okay. So which organizations organized the events? I think you kind of went over this actually.
Well, the first of the Balkan event was organised by the Croats and Slovenes.
Mainly them.
Mainly
the
them.
Federation,
Yeah. Whereas St-Imier.
Well, I'd also say for the Balkans, they had we might ask that a little, we'll answer that a bit later, but it was mainly that, whereas the organisation of St-Imier was a little bit different. And when it happened, there was another event in 2012 that we also attended, which was much more geared towards organised anarchists. So you had unions, you had anarchist networks, organisations. This one was a little bit more open in terms of organisation. The French and Italian anarchist federations were involved to an extent in organising it, but it was a lot of individuals who were involved, and I was told not even delegates from collectives. Often it was just some individual would show up. So whereas previously it had been organised much more in terms of organisations and delegates were sent, and this one was a little bit more individualistic in terms of who organised it. So it's a little bit hard to pin down exactly who was organising it, whereas in the Balkans one it was very clearly had the stamp of the Slovene and Croat Anarchist Federation and their friends.
But there's a social centre at St-Imier, which is it's got a bar, a cinema, a theatre, a library, etc. Yeah, it's really well kitted out and very bit like this place, nice and clean. Not some sort of grotty squat. And they were it's called the Espace Noir, the black space. And they were one of the organisers of it. They've had a social centre there for a very long time. And also, there was input from the French Anarchist Federation, the Italian Anarchist Federation, the Fédération Libertaire des Montagnes, the Libertarian Federation of the Mountains, which is Swiss. And like Bonnie says, though, it's difficult to see who else was involved. And the structure of the organising group was much looser than that of the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair.
So I guess speaking of that, how were these events organised by these organisations?
With the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair, it was a very transparent organisation or structure. With agreed procedures and criteria for involvement. The main organisers were part of the anarchist organisations, as I've already said, the Croats and the Slovenes. And indeed, anarchist communists with the Croat Slavian, the Croat and Slovene organisation, which is the FAO, the FAO. And they said here's a quote from it: the Organisational Assembly of Balkan Anarchist Bookfair 2023 is the organisational body for the preparation and realisation of the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair on the 20th anniversary. The Assembly is composed of individuals and is supported by groups, collectives, organisations and networks that are part of the anarchist and anti-authoritarian movement in the local geography. It's established, organised and operates on the fundamental principles of anti-authoritarian self-organisation, horizontally and based on the autonomy of individuals. And the organisation assembly establishes working and operational groups in accordance with the needs and on the basis of agreements with the aim of carrying out specific tasks, assigns them a mandate and directs them. Okay, so I mean it was pretty clear, it's extremely well organised, and yeah.
But they also, in the Balkans, had they said the purpose, the aim, is about, we're aware of the abolition of class relations and social inequalities is not possible without the abolition of capitalism and patriarchy. So for the Balkans Book Fair, an anti-capitalist perspective was central. And I think that's quite different when you get to St-Imier. Because even though the Balkans had this clear structure and they said this is what our aims for, which meant certain people came because they agreed with those aims, in St-Imier it was very vague. And as I said before, it was aimed at anti-authoritarians, and sometimes it's a bit hard to know what that means, but they didn't particularly mention anti-capitalist. So it meant you were anti-authority, but I suppose you could see that meant you were anti-capitalist, but at the same time, it wasn't explicitly said. So a lot of it, there was a sense that you were just into rebelling, you were anti-authority. So, though they did say that anarchy is not chaos and lack of order, but it says it advocates an anti-authoritarian approach of personal and social organization that promotes the emancipation of all human beings. Again, it's just fine, but there's nothing about the class struggle, there's nothing about being anti-capitalist, which was much more clear in the Balkans. So I would say that the organization of the event reflects this vagueness. So the Italian Anarchist Federation was particularly critical, and they'd been involved. They tried to have some kind of input. They said that the organizing committee wanted basically to have a more spontaneous participation. So instead of inviting certain groups and being a little bit more structured, so anyone could propose any meeting or any debate on an online platform. All you had to do is go on the platform and say you wanted to do a meeting on something, and it would appear in the program. So you didn't know, most of the meetings, you didn't know who was actually organizing it. You didn't actually know whether it would take place or not, because it could have been someone just putting it on and not even showing up, and that did happen a few times. Yeah. I talked to people who said, oh yeah, I went to this meeting and there was no one there. There was no attempt to try to bring different meetings together, so if some were on the same theme, when there's overlap, rather than bringing them together, it was just sort of anyone could propose anything. So in a way, you could say it sort of worked because loads of meetings happened, but there was a rather, very diverse kinds of meetings. And according to the Italian Anarchist Federation, their assessment, they felt in the weeks leading up, people were looking at some of these meetings and thinking, why have we agreed to them? And they did actually look at some of them. For example, there were quite a lot of liberal meetings and conspiracy theorist meetings, and so people began to look at these and maybe take some of them off. But I think they said, according to this, which I think I agree with, the problem is not technical but political. The lack of participation by organisations capable of making collective contributions to the debate was clearly perceived in the fragility of the political base of the event itself. So because it was all these little groups and little individuals, there was a sort of lack of organisation. And according, again, to this Italian assessment, another weakness of it was that there was a lack of international participation. In 2012, international in terms of outside Europe. So in 2012, there was loads of Latin Americans who came, and so they felt that many organised anarchists did not actually attend. We actually talked to some of the French Anarchist Federation. Some says, well, I'm not coming. It's just an anti-authoritarian rabble. It's not organised anarchists. And they said, we're not going to attend. So they thought that it was a little bit, they didn't feel it represented the global organised anarchist movement. It represented, more of a diverse range of people.
You talk about the sort of people who were there a bit, or
well, that's the next question.
Oh, then that's the next one, isn't it?
Yeah,
who attended?
Yeah.
And you've touched on this a bunch, but who attended the two events?
In the Balkans, there was as I've mentioned, the Slovenian Croatian organisation, the FAO. There was the Italian Anarchist Federation.
We should probably explain to them what these two internationals are.
Ah, yes.
Probably.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So for the there's this international called the International Anarchist Federation. So that's in English IAF is the acronym, and in French and other languages it's IFA, the International of Anarchist Federations. So it included the Slovenians and Croats. It included the Italian Anarchist Federation, and then it included the French-speaking Anarchist Federations, because that includes French-speaking parts of Switzerland and Belgium as well. And then the other group represented was the sort of what used to be called Anarchismo, but is now known as organised anarchism, which combines a lot of anarchist communists, including the Anarchist Communist Group. Well, actually, we were the only ones there.
We were the only ones there of that one.
Yes. I mean, there were individuals from some of the groups that were in this international, but yeah.
So the International of Anarchist Federations is considered that anarchist communists are in it, but they might also have anarcho-syndicalists as well, and in some cases they might have individualists. So we often talk about them being a synthesis international, though in practice they're more, I would say, more what we call social anarchism. It's class struggle, but they wouldn't have like anarchist communists. They would have anarchist communists and anarcho-syndicalists in the same federation. Whereas the one that we belong to is explicitly anarchist communist as an international. Though we had very good relations with them when we were there. So.
And the third international, which is the Anarcho-Syndicalist International, the International Workers Association, the IWA or AIT for its acronyms. The only group I think represented there was the Serbians, I think they're called the Anarcho-Syndicalist Initiative. And then finally, there was the New Syndicalist International, in which the main majority of the Spanish CNT, Anarcho-Syndicalist Union, are present at the USI, the Italian Syndicalist Union, and the FAU, the what's it called in
German? Freie Arbeiter Union, the Free Workers Union,
But they were the latter, the last group, the German group. Well, they're not just German; they're also organising in Austria and German-speaking Switzerland. They were the only group present from that current. There were other organisations there. There was the Belarus Anarchist Black Cross. They had a stall. There was the Sierra, which is the long-standing anarchist library in Lausanne in Switzerland. There was the Czech anti-militarist initiative, which takes a no war with a class war stance. And then there was our old friends from this land, Active Distribution, who one of them is now based in Croatia, and they had a big stand. Yeah.
And it was all in English, you see, at the Balkan Anarchist Bookfair.
Yes.
I mean, obviously some stands them in the Italians that their literature, but for us it was very fortunate because all the Balkans, they speak English to each other because that's their common language. So if you think you're going to something and you can't understand, we were probably the only ones who could, really, because I felt really sorry for some of the people who were struggling. They had to do their talks in English, and I really felt quite sorry for them that they had to do that. And I think we were probably the only native English speakers there, despite it being, all in English, so that was quite handy for us.
And all the public meetings were conducted in English, yeah.
So St-Imier, it's really very similar, except we were joined by the APO in Greece this time. And in terms of Anarchismo or our international, there was the platform from Germany came and we ran into one person from the Union de Communistes Libertaires, but we were the only ones with a stall. So we were the only ones from that international with a stall. The IWW was there from Germany, and this time the IWA was represented by CNT in France. And the FAU in Germany were there again, so they heroically came to another event. And this time we had the USI from Italy. So those were the sort of organised groups.
And there was, did I mention the SAC? Oh yeah, that's other organisations.
Yeah, so other organisations. We did have the Belarusian Anarchist Black Cross again, and we're also joined by Bristol this time.
Bristol Anarchist Black Cross.
So there was actually some other Brits at St-Imier, and also joined by the Berlin Anarchist Communists, so another anarchist communist group, and then the group from Sweden. What does that?
The Sverige Arbetaren Centralen, that's the Swedish Syndicalist Union.
But then apart from that, I would still say the majority, there's various called autonomous groups. They call themselves autonomous. There was a load of queer groups. There were Butchenites, and there were some supporters of Rojava. So
yeah, and there was a crossover, obviously, between the Butchenites and the Rojava crowd.
But that was so a little bit different balance of people, I would say.
And there were a lot of publishers, lots of publishers there. I mean, for example, there was German publishers and German anarchist publishers with some of the leading anarchist historians from Germany there, who were rediscovering the quite a heroic tradition in Germany. So they've written a lot of books about all of that. And that they had all their books there, great bunch of people, yeah.
Okay, if I move on to the next section?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how did discussion differ on key issues like Ukraine and things that we care about, like organized anarchism? Again, you've touched on this a bit in previous sections. But.
Do you want to go first?
So about the differences between the different groups, I suppose that I felt that in a big area of debate was the war in Ukraine, and at the Balkans Anarchist Bookfair there was a very strong, well, they say anti-militarist or no war but the class war position, and that was held, I would say, by the vast majority. And we put it, the ACG published on the website the final statement of the Balkans Anarchist Bookfair. And there was even like a big protest while we were there, anti-war protest that people went to.
Yeah, that took place at night. It marched through the centre of the city of Ljubljana. And I'd say there's, 400 strong,
So,
with these banners, no war but the class war banners. It's quite impressive. And there's a little bit of a video of it on the internet.
So with the Balkans, the main people who were supporting the sort of the idea of pro-anarchist fighting in Ukraine position was the Anarchist Black Cross.
The Belarus Anarchist Black Cross
mainly, and but they were a considerable minority, because it's interesting because in the Balkans they've been through this. The person from Serbia, he was telling us about how he had a discussion afterwards, a big argument after one of the meetings, and he was saying, I've been through this, just because I've seen what happens when you take a position for your country against someone else's country, and they managed to maintain the Balkans, the international position throughout a very, very difficult time for them.
Yeah, in his own words, he said, when the bombs were raining down, NATO bombs, weren't they? Raining down on Belgrade, I still had a no war with a class war position. He didn't side with the Serbian government.
So that's one of the really interesting things about the whole Balkans, because they've been through all of that, and they have a very clear position on that.
On the sort of poison of nationalism. Yeah.
And St-Imier was different. There was more of a split. The Italian Anarchist Federation has I would say the International Anarchist Federations themselves is split over the position. The French Anarchist Federation, I would say, is also split, they've told us. But the Italian Anarchist Federation took a very strong anti-militarist position, and Nick was able to speak at one of their meetings.
And other organisations spoke, because there was a series of three no war, the class war, anti-nationalism meetings in a row. So I spoke at one of those with the Italian comrades. Yeah. And then the APO, the Greeks, spoke at another one, and I think who else?
The Slovenes spoke.
And the Slovenes and Croats spoke at another of the meetings. Although there are other meetings at that, and I think there was maybe one at the Balkans book fair that was pro taking part in the military against the Russian invasion. So you've got those big splits.
So that was one of the issues.
Yeah.
But there was, I don't know if you want some other issues.
Yeah. You just continue.
I think so. In the ACG, we talk about the importance of being organised as anarchists. And it doesn't mean just being organised even in a local group. We feel it's important to have a national and international organisation. That without that, there's not going to be a revolution. You may win some reforms, you may make some progress, but if you're actually going to make a movement to actually overthrow capitalism and establish a completely new society, you have to be working together on a grand scale. And so we talk about us organised anarchists. And this is a position we share, I would say, with both the International Anarchist Federations, some of them, and of course our own international, which actually is now calling itself Organised Anarchism. And a lot of people came up to us, and I know it's sort of a stereotype, and sometimes I don't like using it, but they were doing this in English to us. They're saying, oh, there's loads of lifestylists here. That was the kind of stereotype. So it's the idea that people think of being anarchist or anti-authoritarian as having a particular individual sort of rebellious lifestyle. And, you might dress different, or you might, behave in a more, I don't know, aggressive attitude towards authority or whatever, but it's a way of living, and they don't necessarily feel the need to be part of an organization. So they will be either just be individuals who are, I'm an anarchist or I'm an anti-authoritarian, but they won't necessarily be part of an organization. And so what happened is that Deplatform, a group that we have been working with, actually came up to us and they said, really, we're quite disturbed by the fact that there are so few organized anarchists here. And they decided to call a meeting on the last day of organised anarchists to explain.
On Sunday morning. What time was it? 9 o'clock or something?
The last day and everything. But nevertheless, about 50 people showed
Yeah,
up?
there was a lot of people there. Yeah. They were mostly German. It has to be said.
Yeah, those Colombian guys showed
Colombians,
up.
yes, yeah.
And but the whole idea is these were people that were interested in what organised anarchism means. And
very serious, mostly young people, but very serious and obviously very, very earnest, weren't they? But it's a pretty good meeting, really.
So there seems to be this sort of divide, and we did talk with the Germans about maybe when we go to the Amsterdam Book Fair that we might try to do a meeting on why we think organisation is important.
Which is on later this year.
Yeah, why it's not enough just to live an alternative lifestyle. And
I think a lot of these people reject class struggle as well. I got that impression. I mean, I couldn't say, that's a generalisation, I suppose, but I would say you get the impression that they do,
Yes, yeah.
So what else is there?
I think that's right. The importance of class struggle. I really felt that was missing, because we didn't talk about what kind of meetings there were, but it might be worth because it gives you an idea.
Yes.
So at the Balkans Book Fair, there's a lot of anti-nationalism, anti-militarism. There was a very good one that I thought was pretty much class struggle on rural land, food and anarchists, so it was talking about those sorts of issues. They had one on abortion rights. But even then, I felt that there wasn't really much on the workplace or community organising, and oddly enough, not that much on the environment. You would have thought there would have been a little bit more on that. But I think for the Balkans, one of their main purposes is to bring people together from the Balkans to work together. But if you look at St-Imier, some of the meetings, I've got a little list here somewhere. Yeah, it's hard to summarise because there were so many. But it has to be said that a lot of people came up to us at the beginning and says, I can't find any meetings I want to go to. They did seem tangential to the whole, class struggle movement. So I think there was one meeting on organising in the workplace. We're talking about hundreds of meetings, hundreds. And there was one meeting organised by the Berlin Anarchist Communist Group. But also, because I was able to, because you can just put anything up, I did a meeting on land justice and land rights. And that was quite well attended. Quite a lot of people were interested in that and talking about, the class nature of, land ownership and the need to get rid of private property and things like that. And that was quite good. But what disturbs me a bit, a lot of people, when they talk about land, it's sort of going out into the countryside and living in some kind of commune, And one story, one of the meetings, someone said, they said, oh yeah, we're going to go and live in the countryside. Yeah, but the people there, they're so reactionary. We don't really like them. And we miss our friends in the city. So we're trying to work out how we can have more links with the people in the city. And I'm thinking, you're going to go live in the countryside. If you can't relate to the local people, then it's, okay, maybe they're not like you. Maybe they don't have alternative dress styles, maybe they're a bit conservative or whatever. But, these are the people you've got to relate to if you're going to go live there. But they were thinking, we've got to bring loads of our friends from the city to the countryside. And so this disturbed me a little bit. So it was this sort of attitude that almost like that's it. It was like really was a bubble. We talk about anarchist bubbles. And I felt to a certain extent, that's what St-Imier was, to an extent. It was this giant bubble of people that were all alternative, and they had their alternative culture and everything, but were they really relating to actual real struggles?
To social struggles.
And the amount of meetings, nothing on housing, nothing on health, all the issues that people are facing, anti-gentrification, all of these we would have had in common, wouldn't we, from the different countries. But really it was just loads of other things.
There were some very weird and wonderful meetings at St-Imier. I can't remember.
Hitchhiking and anarchism?
Oh yes, an anarchist approach to hitchhiking. What?
Yeah, that was one of them. And
that was just one of the less zany ones.
I don't mind that, there were sing-alongs and that's all fine.
It's all right to have a sing-along.
But the point is, it's just lacking in, looking at organising around issues and relating to people. And I suppose we should then say that this link to some of the behaviours. So,
Yes.
That's one of the problems with all our book fairs and everything is, to what extent do people come in off the street, do we get people in to some of our book fairs? It almost is like some kind of social event for people who are already converted. The Balkans, I can't really say, but it was very central. It's a big city, Ljubljana, so to what extent people were coming and going. But St-Imier really felt, despite the history, that it was plonked down in the middle of this town, and it didn't help by the fact that there was a railway line running through the town, and the campsite was on one side, and there were some of the venues. Well, despite the organisers putting up signs everywhere not to cross the railway line, of course people did.
And then guess what happened?
And this was the first day, so there was a near miss.
Yeah.
So the railway company said, well, we're not running trains, it's too dangerous.
And then guess what happened after that? They charged the organisers a very large sum of money because of the closures, because they had to put on buses instead. And then the other thing, which I think showed a really lack of respect for the local people, was they were writing up slogans all over the place, all over people's houses. Their personal flats and houses, all over it. The centre of St-Imier is covered with slogans, and they ended up having to pay. The organisers ended up having to pay to clean off the graffiti afterwards. They ended up with a big bill. So I don't know how they're going to pay it all off.
Lack of connection, you didn't feel as if it was embedded in any movement in St-Imier. You just felt that they plonked themselves down in their bubble, parachuted, and so there's a problem.
At the same time, the last time, we talked about the previous St-Imier event, which is much better behaved, and that was fine. But the local people, they were still fine, about things in general. I think, they seemed to be, they weren't up in arms about it, and the local council was fine about it as well, But I'm not sure if another event like that will happen there, All right. Anything else? Oh, the final, yeah.
We're going to talk a bit about what was good about the
the positive points.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the Balkans.
Well, Yeah, the Balkans one. I mean, it was very impressive. You know, the fact they were able to mount a large demonstration in the city, which was pretty disciplined. The fact that it was extremely well organised, the Balkan Bookfair, with some, you know, interesting topics, despite the heat and everything. Yeah, I mean, you came away from the Ljubljana book fair, you know, feeling very positive. I'd say I felt, you know, it gave me a bit of a boost actually. I'd say you think, oh, this is international anarchism, you know, organised anarchism. It was a good buzz.
And talking to the Slovenes and Croats, they were really pleased because they felt they'd progressed in their own coordination with the other Balkan organisations. So the book fair was not just a book fair, it was an occasion for them to come together and progress their working together, and that happened. And also, as I said before, there was a statement, a summary statement that came out of the Balkans. St-Imier, on the other hand, there was no summary statement. It would have been impossible. There was no gathering of everyone together. The end was just the end. People just dispersed, and there was no. Well, you never have agreed anyway on a common statement.
Definitely not.
And so we felt that you just felt quite tired, and you met a lot of nice people, you know, good people, and you know there were good meetings, no doubt about it. But you didn't come away feeling that there was some momentum. So the Balkans, for them, felt like it was part of building a movement, it was progressing a movement. St-Imier felt was an event, a festival, that made people feel good about being an anarchist, I guess, or whatever. But I'm not even sure, some people are arguing that it's actually put the movement backwards a bit, if anything. But not really sure how much it progressed the international anarchist movement, and it's probably unlikely that it's going to happen there again.
And you know, there's a huge field, massive great field, you know, sloping down into the valley with all these tents there, and there were these cows sort of looking with incomprehension at this. And I think maybe the townspeople were a bit the same, really. But I mean, one final thing, you know, you realise there's very large numbers of people in Europe, include Britain in Europe, who are disenchanted and disaffected with the present system of capitalism in one way or the other. Do you want to add anything?
Well, loads of young people, really. It was very white, it has to be said.
There were some black people there,
but very few. And it was, but loads of women.
Yes, there were a very large number of women there at both events.
And
which wasn't true in the bad old days, you know, when it was mostly male dominated. You know, I think that has changed quite drastically over the last couple of decades. You know,
and when you think that they fed people, all those people, they organised all of that, and despite the, you know, the things with the train and the graffiti, I mean, it was still quite remarkable that all those people could be fed and have a place to stay, and all those meetings could take place, all that could happen, is still, I think, quite a feat, and should be congratulated, the people who organised it.